Hello, I am back with yet another book review and yet another one from Robert A. Russell. I find them so valuable that I might even do a whole series on Robert A. Russell and all of his books, because even though all of his books kind of have the same message, it's very nuanced in the way that he describes it, and he goes into specific detail about certain aspects of consciousness and certain aspects of essentially all of his work in a nutshell is about releasing conscious control, releasing the idea that we are in control of our life and there's no power, releasing that idea of that concept that we should control our lives, essentially. All of his sort of work sort of says, actually, everything is done for you. There is a divine power that flows through you. And all you actually have to do is surrender, release, trust, have faith, all of that sort of thing. And when you do that, life just flows and life is a lot easier. This particular book is called The Quickest Way to Everything Good. And me, as the kind of person I am, I always like shortcuts. I like the quickest way to doing things. If there's anything I do in life, I'll always try and find the easiest and least effort way. Why? Not because I'm lazy, but because I like to do things from a sense of ease and flow. I've spent far too much of my life trying to force things, trying to put so much energy and effort into things, when actually the truth is, our life can be a lot more smooth and free-flowing if only we get in alignment with our subconscious, that everything is done for us. And Robert A. Russell was a Christian preacher. I read something very interesting about him yesterday. He used to preach on stage with a spot. He used to darken the whole church and just have a spotlight on him, and he would be preaching, and it would be this sort of dramatic sermon, essentially. But he used to draw huge crowds because of his practical application of the Bible. And he goes back to the main premise, which is like the golden thread running through all of his work, which is seek ye first the kingdom. Seek it first, and all these things will be added unto you. And he says they shall be added. What does this mean? And he says that the divine, God, subconscious, higher self, will supply every need. In the Bible it says, take no thought for the morrow. So that essentially means we are taken care of. I mean, years ago, I do believe that we were truly tapped into this intuitive part of ourselves, and I believe that we lived much more from our sixth sense. I mean, you see it in tribes people, that they'll be on the land and they'll intuitively know not to eat a certain plant because, it might cause harm to the body, or, that they start to get so in tune with nature and so in tune with the oneness of life that they can noetically, and there's an amazing institute called Institute of Noetic Sciences, and noesis is picking up information from the sixth sense. That's what Noetic Sciences is. And just as an aside, there's a huge amount of scientific research on this stuff. Dean Radin, Marilyn Schlitz, all of those people, look them up. Read some of Dean Radin's books. A lot of this isn't just based on religion. There is a science of noesis as well. And it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Going back to Robert A. Russell, he says, put the kingdom first and the crooked ways will be made straight. When you think of the divine and you put the divine first, you're holding the divine, or what that concept of the divine is within your mind. Whatsoever things that are lovely, whatsoever things that are beautiful, think on these things. It says that. Why? Because creation comes from within and then is reflected outside. If we're looking and changing the mirror, you wouldn't look at your hair in the mirror and then if it was out of place, you wouldn't try and change the mirror because it wouldn't change anything really. You would go to the cause, which is yourself, and change that. So in Robert A. Russell, the quickest way to everything good, he basically says, look, if there's anything in life, you want to heal yourself, you want to make more money or whatever it is, have anything really, seek ye first the kingdom. Whatever the external looks like, keep your mind fixated on the highest. Withdraw attention from the undesirable, keep your attention on the desirable. What does that mean? You've got a situation, doesn't look great. Inside, you perceive something else. Turn your face from all abominations, turn away from negative appearances. Have nothing to do with it in consciousness, turn away from appearance. Why? Because he says that we learn to live from the centre instead of the surface. The centre of our being is all imagination. And Neville says that our imagination, is God. So when, or we can say our imagination is creation, if you're not religious. Our imagination is source. Our imagination is life. Our imagination is energy. So let's take a health situation, for example. We're seeing something in the mirror, we don't like it. In our minds, we've got a vision of ourselves healthy, strong, toned, full of life, invigorated, sparkly eyes, radiant, alive. He talks about, Robert A. Russell in this book, he talks about the prodigal son and the parable of the prodigal son. I love that story because it's just such an interesting metaphor. The person went away and then they came back because they kept trying to change their circumstances. They kept trying to change the external and it didn't actually work. And then they came back. So it's almost like, he talks about if you go away from your divine centre, you get attached to what's going on in your world and you start trying to change things through your own power and you don't look within. And then you wonder why you keep on repeating patterns and loops. It's because you're not going to the source, which is within. And when you go to the source and you work on the source, it's like source code, in a computer. You go to the source and you hack that source code. You go back to the source and you're like, hang on a minute, this is playing out a program that isn't actually me. I'm going to align with the source of oneness and I'm going to change, my external reality. And just as an aside, I don't know if you've watched any of the new Black Mirror, but Joan is Awful, I found a very, very interesting episode. I want to watch it again because I found the bit at the end where she hacks into the quantum sorry if you've not seen it yet, but she hacks into the quantum supercomputer that was essentially recording her story. She hacks into it and she smashes it, and that story was playing out that she was awful. I just thought there were so many hidden meanings in that Black Mirror episode. Anyway, I digress like I always do. Robert A. Russell says, you must fill your consciousness so full of God's presence and power, or divine presence and power, that there is no room for anything else. Implant in your mind the idea that the divine is always God or divine is always with you and that they're working through you. He said the kingdom within you is the magnet. I love that. The kingdom within you is the magnet. So, what does that mean? You've got everything within yourself. In imagination, you're infinite. In imagination, you can have the most beautiful, the most lovely, everything. You can assume that ideal self-concept now. As Neville would say, you can be that person now in consciousness. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's the same thing. It's the same message. I mean, I like Robert A. Russell's interpretation. It's Christian. But there's so many interpretations of this truth that I believe is truth. And it can only really be proved experientially to yourself, Can only really test it within your own consciousness. I would never, anything I say on this channel, I would never want anybody to just accept it. It's about experimenting with your mind, experimenting with your consciousness and your beliefs, and thinking, okay, what am I believing about this situation? This situation's going on in my life. Let's look within. What meaning am I giving to this situation? What thoughts am I attaching? He said there's no need to seek anything. He goes back to the Bible, take no thought for your life, what you eat, what you drink. And he talks about labourless activity, least effort, And it's almost like, can we allow ourselves to let go and trust that things will show up and we don't actually have to carve our own path? The path is actually laid out for us. He says that the way to claim this kingdom, the quickest way to everything good, is through your consciousness of it. If you're holding divine in mind, that the divine's working through you, that you are a divine being, things will change, because you're holding it in consciousness. And it's looking through the eyes of God, which is the eyes of good, which is the eyes of love. It's a very, very interesting book. It's one of those books that, like all of his stuff, I would personally listen to again and again and again. But that's just what resonates with me. And there's so many other different forms of this message. Check it out. I'd love to know what you think. If you've got any comments, questions, leave them below.